Welcome, Mr. Advertising Thomas Kolster. Welcome, Thomas. Welcome
Thank you
to
so
Switzerland,
much.
Thomas. Danish Dynamite. You know what I'm talking about.
I do. We did pretty well, didn't we?
We did. You have a great nation.
Yeah.
What about football? Are you a supporter?
I have an older brother, and he's very good at football. So my thing was I had to choose music. So I'm probably the only Dane who doesn't know anything about football, and that's so embarrassing in front of you.
Oh, that's crazy. That's crazy, but it's a fact. But you are a Superman. You are going to talk about Superman. Are you also one of them?
Supermen and women, no, I fail miserably. Every time I try and live more sustainably, I fail. And that's obviously also what we're going to talk about, how difficult it is.
This hero trap.
Yes.
Have you ever been in there?
Unfortunately, yes. I also advised companies to go into the hero trap. So that's what we're going to talk about. It's going to be good fun.
It's great to have you with us. Thank you very much for being with us. Und jetzt sind wir gespannt auf seine Ausführungen. Bitte schön, Thomas Kolster.
Thank you so much. First of all, I'm really sorry to my mom because I do actually speak German. But if I have to do this whole thing in German, it's going to be a very, very long day because it's very, very slow. So sorry about that. Anyways, I used to be a very, very big believer in purpose. But today I had to revise my beliefs after 10 years having advocated hard for purpose. I don't know if any of you ever have had a wetsuit on. Wetsuits? Anybody had a wetsuit on? You know what a wetsuit is, right? Yeah? Okay, so the thing about purpose most often is that it feels a little bit like peeing in a wetsuit. Some more people have tried a wetsuit on because in the beginning it feels warm and nice, but it quickly begins to stink. And it's exactly the same thing with purpose that we want to avoid here today. My early journey, my early years started in advertising as an advertising creative, as a copywriter. And now we're at Direct Days, right? So any copywriters in the house? Yes, perfect. There's one there. That's good. One copywriter. So I started out as a young copywriter, and this is about 10 years ago, and this is kind of fun because we have obviously COP26 going on right now in Glasgow, right? But 10 years, 11 years ago, we in Copenhagen was hosting the Climate Summit. And I had very high expectations because we had Barack Obama, we had Tony Blair, and I really hoped that our elected government leaders could do something about this environmental emergency we're in. But as we all know what happened, this sort of happened. Not a lot, right? So I thought to myself, as a young marketeer, I asked the question, what can I do with the skills that I have? And what can you do as marketeers with the millions of people you daily touch? If you think about it, a brand like Coca-Cola, probably somewhere in the house here, touches around 1.5 billion people on a daily basis. What if that could be used for something better? So that provoked me to write my first book, Good Advertising. So that's a while back. That's when I was still a big believer in purpose. As you can see, things have changed. Now the seats are not only gray, my hair is getting gray as well. But I also realized quite a bit. Because back then, a decade ago, purpose, doing good, social change was quite a new concept. It was brands like Ben & Jerry's, like Patagonia, all these brands. But it was hard to find, in fact, back then, brands that had a burning purpose. But today, that has definitely changed, right? Because today, if you look at the market space, the commercial break, it looks a little bit like this, right? Every brand, every leader, incredibly busy talking about how good they are, right? Look at us, what we're doing for ocean plastics. Look at us, what we do for climate change. So the thing is really, is that authentic? Do we really believe all these purpose efforts today? I mean, basically, I feel, and I'm sure that it's the same thing here in Switzerland, that when I go into a supermarket, right, every sort of brand is pitching itself as messiahs or Mother Teresa, and you're like, what the heck? So interestingly enough, in branding, not a lot have changed because we keep doing the same mistake. If we took most brands and we put it on a psychologist's chair and we asked the psychologist to evaluate those statements, we would probably say either delusional or megalomaniac. And I'll give you a point. I know you can't have a presentation about purpose without Patagonia, right? But if you really listen to what Patagonia is saying, and remember, I'm a copywriter, so I take words literally. So they say, we're in the business to save our home planet. Doesn't that sound a bit crazy? I mean, honestly, it's a company that sells t-shirts to people who are stuck in a one-bedroom apartment. That's a pretty high goal bar to set, right? It's a pretty high goal bar to set. So the interesting thing, 10 years later, what has happened? This has sort of happened. And no, it's not a plane, it's not a bird, it's another brand on its way to fly into the hero trap. Because it seems like the more all of us in this room are talking about it, talking about purpose, and hopefully seeing purpose as the lifebuoy to our brands, people aren't trusting us. Because we know we need to respond, right? To the social challenges, the environmental challenges, to the Me Too movement, all these movements, and we get a bit scared. What to do? What should our response be? And the second thing is, because we're also here to talk about performance today, right? What's the sort of business case about this whole purpose thing? And I've always been very curious about that. And this is probably something you can recognize in your own brands and your own organizations. But when you in fact look at it, and these are global numbers, you can probably have something a little bit similar here in Switzerland. But 68% of people say they want to buy from purposeful companies. But only 39%, only 26% of people follow through. So there's a gap of 39%. A commercial opportunity for all of us in this room if we figure that out. But maybe, maybe it's not surprising that gap exists, in fact. Because if you think about New Year's pledges, right? How often don't we say to ourselves, wait a moment, Thomas, I want to do something, I want to get back in shape or whatever, and then just a month in, the shoes are still lying there in the corridor. So most New Year's pledges are really just a new beginning to bad old habits, right? So let's do a little exercise here just to wake all of you up. I want to hear your New Year's pledges. This is also going to be my German test, by the way, so I can see if I can pick it up, right? So what I want you to do is shout out in the room a New Year's pledge. I'm actually helping you out because New Year's is coming up right now, so, okay? So shout it out loud, your New Year's pledge, okay? I'm going to count down. 3, 2, 1. I know Swiss people are perfect. I know that, We Danes, we fail all the time. I know Swiss people are perfect. But let's just give you a second chance, maybe to improve just the slightest little thing, right? Just the slightest little thing. I was already actually disappointed today because I thought Swiss was always running on time. And we're already late on the program. So at least someone up there in that room is not perfect. So they can at least say, next time I'm going to be timely. But let's try again. 3, 2, 1. It's almost like you don't trust your own ability to create change, right? But a key thing about this new book was, in fact, that I looked at my own life, and that was what provoked me to write this book. Because in the first book, I said, wait a moment, I believe in brands, organizations, and leaders to create change. But maybe that's wrong. Because I'm the one that fails constantly. And one of the things I wanted to change in my life was, because I'm flying all these places, not good for the climate, so I wanted to eat more plant-based. And I connected with a company, which in Danish is called Årstiderne. It means seasons. You probably have something similar in Switzerland. But basically what they do, they create these boxes with farm fresh produce delivered at my doorstep. But that's not all, because I interviewed the CEO of the company, and he doesn't talk about a plant-based revolution or some grandiose statements like Patagonia. He talks about me having to find this within myself. So it comes with recipes, and by that they've actually taught me to make more plant-based food. And remember, I come from Denmark, and I know that Denmark is today famous for its cuisine, right? But when I grew up, wow, overboiled potatoes, like pork that tasted like a shoe sole, wasn't nice. So I sort of felt that I had to kind of bring up my cooking skills. And today, thanks to this company, most of the time, and you can see that on my Instagram account, I'll brag to my community of people because I actually realized creating this beautiful vegan pie. Although most of the time, when you try changing yourself, it probably ends up a little bit more like this. But that's the opportunity, right, that we as brands and leaders can take. How do we help people achieve these things? And if we look at how the marketplace has changed over these years, obviously we've all been there, talked about a faster car, right, at some point. Now that didn't make a lot of sense. Then we started making brands that were sort of more like personalities. So driving a masculine car, so driving a BMW and feeling more like a man, whatever that means today, by the way. Then good advertising came out, and we talked about the societal difference. So let's say a more environmentally friendly car. But today, with so many brands pitching itself on values and purpose, I don't believe we're buying the why, the reason why you do these things, or what you do. I really do believe that it's who you can help me become. It's the change that you can enable in my life. It's making me healthier, more connected, greener, less biased. Because that's the real, authentic difference. And let me give you an example, true story. Unfortunately, me and my girlfriend recently split. That sometimes happens, Sad story, but true. And some of you have probably been through a similar process. But in the beginning, like you brands wanting to rescue your relationship with people, I was trying to do the same thing. So in the beginning, obviously, I tell her, I promise I'm going to take the dishes. I promise I'm going to come home earlier from Switzerland and all that stuff. But at some point, words won't cut it. So she wants to see a bit of action, right? So I start coming home from work, and I remember putting down that toilet seat. It's always that classic thing, right? Or I start cooking a little bit of food to show her that, hey, wait a moment, honey, I love you. I'm going to show commitment. But at some point, that won't cut it either. So the real thing is, in fact, how do I make her feel? Does she feel loved, inspired, taken care of? So what I'm talking about is a fundamental shift in the way that we look at leadership, in fact. Because if we look at it, for too long, brands and CEOs have stepped up on stages and said, believe in us to create the change. It's so easy to fail. Obviously, when you have a CEO of a big company that goes up there and say, we're going to do this, net zero, net blah, 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 at one point, somebody's going to point fingers because climate, diversity, it's not a constant. What was good enough 3 years ago is not good enough anymore. So it's really about understanding how can you help people become agents of that change. So I created something. I looked to psychotherapy and coaching because those disciplines are goal-oriented, right? For those of you who have been to a coach or whatever. So I looked at a model, and I shaped a model called the Arrow. And it really asked 4 fundamental questions in terms of shaping a new leadership and in terms of shaping brands that do create change. Remember all those New Year's pledges in the room, right? So the first one is obviously, what is it that you do? That should be a question all of you in this room should be able to answer. Hopefully, that might be the MacBooks or the AirPods or whatever. How are you unique in delivering those products or services? Maybe they're from Switzerland, So they're supposedly timely. Apparently not today, but supposedly timely. The third question, more importantly, who can you help people become? What are some of the roles? What are some of the challenges? What are some of the biases that all of us are faced with? And how can you, as a brand, help us overcome some of those? And the last question is, in fact, when do you enable this change? Because we all tried it, change without a deadline, and we're not going to succeed. And the outcome of this, I call a transformative promise. Not a purpose, a transformative promise, because it's a promise of what you can enable of change in people's lives. And let me give you an example of a company who's done that. Also, we talk performance and purpose, right? Way too often, it ends up being a two-headed purpose monster. One side of the organization saying, oh, let's be nice, let's do something good for the climate. And the other side, we as marketeers need to deliver on, is sales goals, right? Targets. So it's saying sales goals, targets. That most of the time doesn't really align. But there's a company, a health insurance company called Discovery. They are present in 7 markets. I'm actually not sure if they're in Switzerland. What they talk about is their transformative promise is to incentivize people to live healthier. So you can sort of feel how that speaks internally in the organization and externally in the organization. And they've been applauded as one of the most innovative health insurance companies in the world. They have a program that's called Vitality. I'm sure that some of you have reward programs, right? Reward program, yeah, most of you have, right? What these guys have done is quite genius, because let's say that you go down the supermarket and you buy fruits and vegetables. You get rewarded. Or let's say you go to the gym, you get rewarded. And they've done a big survey where they've compared people who didn't take part in the program with people who took part in the program. 200,000 people. The crazy thing is that the people who take part in the program exercise 5.1 more day per month. Think about that change. I would actually be quite happy when I had my New Year's pledge about exercising more if I did 5.1 day more. The business case of that is also quite good, because healthier customers means less paying out premiums. But I wanted to understand this even better. So I did a survey to compare classic purposeful commercials, like Budweiser, you know, saying this bot's for better tomorrow, classic purpose language, right? There's always something about tomorrow or better or good or planet or, you know, a lot of that language where you're like, you know. I don't know about you, but if you had, honestly, if you had, when you wake up in the morning, now I can't see your name there, but no, I'll find out. So, Elia? Is that, okay, that's a name, Elia. Okay, so Elia, it's a good name, it's a good name. So you wake up in the morning, right? And on your bedside table, it says, do good for people and planet. What are you going to do different? I mean, are you going to hold the door here today for, you know, or maybe you want something that's a little bit more operational, right? And so let's compare Budweiser, classic purposeful commercial, with a transformative commercial from Procter & Gamble's brand, Always. Some of you might have seen this commercial. Basically, it's all about this phase where young girls turn women and how they perceive the sentence like a girl. Run like a girl, unfortunately, still in some cultures means you run weaker. You're not as strong as the boys, as the men. They wanted to change that. When we compared that across 4 commercials, the interesting thing is, on brand warmth, they all do pretty well. You know, we like the fuzzy feeling of the niceness of the whole thing. On competence, also the same thing. And I thought that was curious. Because remember in the one commercial, they don't even talk about how good they are. But we still see them as competent. I don't know how you feel about it, but I have the same thing with real estate agents. I don't know why I hate real estate agents. Sorry about that, but there's this one real estate agent who always comes in and he talks about how many houses he sold and how good the real estate shop is. Then there's this other real estate agent who comes into your house and is like, you know, why are you moving? What do you like? All that stuff. Trying to at least to put himself in my shoes. So all competent, but the most important thing is motivation. So people are actually on average 29.6% more motivated by a transformative approach. And when we actually look at people's willingness to pay a premium price, it's 29.4%. But maybe it's not surprising. Maybe the thing is that we don't want to hear about all the stuff you want to do for society and environment and racism and all these things. Maybe they just want you to play a role in my life, a meaningful role. Answer that who question. Like we have tons of friends. All our friends play different roles in our lives. Some are there for parties, some are there when we're heartbroken. Same thing. So how many of you today feel that you have a sort of significant say over the marketing mix? Do you feel that you hold the power in your hands today over people? Do you feel okay about that? A lot of silence in the room. It kind of feels a little bit like this guy's in control, right? All of us, you know, the amount of baby pictures and stuff we upload, that's okay. That's okay. You can put it up. So if you take my niece Clara as an example, she's probably a better marketeer than most of you in this room. At the age of 10, she already knows how to sell on Instagram, even though she's not allowed. So how do we turn that into also a movement? Because for some reason, we're doing the mistake of putting ourselves as the leaders of the narrative, and we do that in marketing as well. Quite honestly, for those of you who have teenage daughters or sons, at one point, you have to let them go. Sorry to say, there's nothing worse than a mom and dad that shows up at that soccer match to much embarrassment. And the same thing we're doing in marketing. Because you do business on your terms, not on our terms. So let me just give you one quick example here. So there's this brand called II, and on Black Friday, they found a really meaningful role to play in people's lives because they are sort of like a Patagonia. They talk to people who do outdoor activities. So on Black Friday, they asked people to opt outside, to go out and enjoy the outdoors. And the interesting thing is, people took part in that movement, and they shared, and they loved it. And when we actually look at the numbers behind, it's interesting to go in a very short amount of time from 1.4 million people to 15 million people taking part. And even if you look at the state parks across the US, it went from a day that didn't exist to one of the most visited days. Again, understanding that gap of the 39%. So I think it's about time that we understand the role that we want to play in people's lives. For too long, we see brick and mortar stores failing because the only thing we do is try and sell. We don't try and create change. So it's really about understanding how your brand can be part of this movement. I'm just going to give you one example from IKEA. We all know IKEA, right? Famous for breaking up couples. We all been there, right? No, famous for big malls. But in fact, in Denmark, they created this small little planning studio because they know that they have a fundamental role to play in our lives. So this 150 square meter store, in fact, have designers sitting ready to help us create our dream home, and today even a hopefully more sustainable home. So when we want to create brands with purpose, who do we actually really believe? And I think, at least in my life, the greatest leaders in my life have been those who have made me experience more, try new things, see more stuff. So maybe ask yourself this one question: what brand, leader, organization have in fact created real change in your life? My list was extremely short, and that's disappointing when we talk about purpose. So we need to fundamentally change the way we look at leadership. Also not just because we want to create prosperous brand that bridges the 39% gap that I talked about, but also because we, now it's Glasgow and COP26, have a fundamental crisis to solve. So how do we push people towards action? And I can say one thing for those of you who have tried to smoke at some point in your life. Your loved ones can tell you to put away the cigarettes. Your children can tell you. They even put these warning signs in the packages. All you do is avoid that. So the only one who in fact can create the much needed change is all of you. So I know I started with a provocative image of Jesus, but I'm also going to end up with that one, because I think the real key to this is, please don't pitch yourself as the heroes, but make all of us the heroes of the narrative. That's what I had to tell you here today, and thank you so much for listening to How to Avoid the Hero Trap. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Thomas. I follow you, but it sounds not that optimistic. You agree?
I'm a hopeless optimism. I still
have to.
I still feel I might get back with that girlfriend, or I might actually learn to cook good plant-based food. We're hopeless optimists, I think.
One second question about your journey from the first to the second book.
Yeah.
How difficult was this journey? But it's a little bit the opposite.
Yeah. I think because it was tough to be a big believer in purpose, and in fact then go up against a lot of the stuff I wrote about in the first book. And I think in the beginning I was a bit more afraid how that would be received in the community. But I think also that one has to view it as an evolution. Because 10 years ago there wasn't a lot of purposeful brands. And so it sort of made sense. We bought into it, I think we loved it. And it delivered in the marketplace. Today, there's just too many, and I think we need to change the approach.
Dankeschön. Thomas, I really want to show you that we have New Year's resolutions, so I make the start with it, and I switch to German.
That's okay, I do
you
get it.
Understand
I do get
German.
it, yeah.
Also, mein Neujahrsvorsatz ist, ich möchte dankbarer sein und viel weniger trinken.
I have that one as well.
Okay.
I actually do have that one as well.
The same story.
The less drinking, yeah.
Darf ich dich fragen, wie heißt du, was machst du und was sind deine Neujahrsvorsätze für das nächste Jahr?
Mirko, mein Name. Arbeite bei Live Systems und bin Product Manager. Gute Frage. Ich habe keine Ahnung, was meine Neujahrsvorsätze sind. Ich mache mir nie welche. Ich mache mir innerhalb eines Jahres kleinere Vorsätze und setze diese um. Also.
Sollen wir zusammen, Mirko, ausmachen, dass wir weniger trinken? Also nicht heute. Heute trinken wir viel beim Apero. Machen wir das?
Können machen.
Okay, vielleicht nicht. Also gut. Dann frage ich Sie, wer sind Sie, was machen Sie und was sind Ihre Vorsätze für das nächste Jahr?
Ich will mehr Zeit haben, für mich und andere.
Das ist sehr schön.
Nicht?
Ja.
Das könnte möglich werden, würde ich jetzt mal sagen.
Ich gehe mal in die Reihe rein. Der Herr guckt mich sehr ernst an und jetzt lächelt er. Hallo, wer sind Sie?
I'm David.
Hello, David.
I work for the International Committee of the Red Cross.
Yes.
And my wish for next year is to get less angry when I'm disappointed with something. I have the tendency to lose temper. So I have to improve that. Calm down, bit of yoga, relax.
We should that, like everyone should that do. Yeah. And we have eine Umfrage as well. Like we asked the people if they had a brand in their life which had like a positive change on them. And they said, like, yeah, they had a few. But ich habe kein Brand, der mein Leben positiv verändert hat.
The blue one.
Nicht ein, yeah, I think not only, no.
Not one brand.
I would probably be on the red one. You know, a handful probably.
Rainer, hast du einen Brand, der dein Leben positiv verändert hat?
Schwierig.
Oder?
Is there a brand that changed completely your life?
Not completely, but take you probably would pick this brand. Nike, for example. Nike sometimes really pushes you when you lose, you know, your motivation for doing sports. They have the fuel band. They have some of these things. I think Nike could be a good example for some people who do sport.
Und bei dir dann Alkohol?
But in a bad way.
Okay, thank you very much. Thomas,
you so much.
What are your next projects? Just one question.
Next project?
Yes?
Maybe fixing that relationship. I don't know.
Oh, that's great. Great job. Thank you very much. Thomas Kolster.